In the early hours of a Wednesday morning, news broke across the globe that President Trump had signed an executive order imposing a staggering 245% tariff on a wide array of goods imported from China. The announcement sent shockwaves through financial markets, reverberating from Wall Street to the bustling streets of Beijing. The decision, framed as a bold step towards protecting American jobs and industries, was met with a mixture of applause and outrage, igniting fierce debates about the future of trade relations between the two economic giants. In the United States, reactions were swift and varied. Supporters of the president hailed the move as a necessary measure to combat what they perceived as unfair trade practices by China. They argued that for too long, American manufacturers had been at a disadvantage, struggling against subsidized Chinese products that flooded the market at prices that undercut local businesses. The rhetoric from the White House emphasized a commitment to America first, a mantra that had resonated deeply with a significant portion of the electorate. For them, this tariff was a beacon of hope, a sign that the administration was willing to take a stand against globalization that they believed had eroded their livelihoods. However, the reaction was not universally positive. Economists and industry leaders expressed grave concerns about the potential fallout from such a drastic measure. The National Association of Manufacturers quickly released a statement warning that the tariff could lead to higher prices for consumers and businesses alike. They pointed out that many American companies relied on Chinese imports for raw materials and components essential to their production processes. An increase of this magnitude would not only inflate costs, but could also disrupt supply chains that had been meticulously built over decades. The fear was palpable. This could lead to job losses in sectors that had thrived on a symbiotic relationship with Chinese manufacturers. In the corridors of Congress, the response was equally divided. Some lawmakers, particularly those from manufacturing-heavy districts, voiced their support, echoing the sentiments of their constituents who had long felt the sting of competition from abroad. Others, particularly in the Senate, raised alarms about the potential for a trade war. They recalled the tit-for-tat tariffs imposed during previous trade disputes, which had often spiraled into broader economic conflicts that hurt both sides. The specter of a trade war loomed large, with fears that retaliatory measures from China could escalate, leading to a cycle of tariffs that would ultimately harm the American economy. Meanwhile, in China, the reaction was one of disbelief followed by a calculated response. The government quickly convened an emergency meeting to assess the implications of the tariff. Officials expressed their disappointment, framing the decision as a betrayal of the cooperative spirit that had characterized the economic relationship between the two nations in recent years. They emphasized the importance of dialogue and negotiation, urging the U.S. to reconsider its stance. However, behind closed doors, strategists began to formulate a plan for retaliation. They understood that a direct response would be necessary to demonstrate strength, but they also recognized the need for a measured approach that would not further inflame tensions. As the days unfolded, the narrative surrounding the tariff began to evolve. Media outlets dissected the implications, with pundits weighing in from all angles. Some argued that the tariff was a necessary evil, a bold move that could ultimately force China to reform its trade practices and intellectual property theft. Others warned of the dangers of isolationism, cautioning against the erosion of alliances that had taken years to cultivate. The discourse became increasingly polarized, reflecting the deep divisions within American society. In the business community, uncertainty reigned. Companies that had previously enjoyed smooth trade relations with China now found themselves scrambling to assess the impact of the new tariff. Importers of electronics, textiles, and machinery began to reevaluate their strategies. Some sought alternative suppliers in other countries, hoping to mitigate the damage. Others prepared for the inevitable price increases that would come, anticipating that consumers would bear the brunt of the costs. Retailers, in particular, braced for a challenging holiday season, knowing that higher prices could deter spending at a time when consumer confidence was already fragile. Internationally, the ramifications of the tariff extended far beyond the U.S.-China relationship. Allies in Europe and Asia watched closely, concerned that the U.S. might be setting a precedent for protectionist policies that could disrupt global trade. Leaders in the European Union expressed their apprehension, warning that such actions could lead to a fragmentation of the international trading system. They emphasized the importance of multilateralism and cooperation, urging the U.S. to engage in dialogue rather than unilateral action. As the weeks passed, the prospect of a trade war became increasingly tangible. China retaliated with its own tariffs on American goods, targeting agricultural products such as soybeans and pork, which hit Midwestern farmers particularly hard. The agricultural sector, already reeling from the effects of previous tariffs, found itself caught in the crossfire of a geopolitical struggle. Farmers who had once supported Trump now faced the grim reality of plummeting prices and uncertain futures. The heartland, a crucial base of support for the president, began to show signs of discontent. In response, the administration attempted to assuage fears by announcing a series of relief measures for affected farmers. However, the effectiveness of these measures was met with skepticism. Many farmers expressed frustration, feeling that they were being used as pawns in a larger game of political chess. The emotional toll was evident as families who had spent generations cultivating their land faced the prospect of losing everything they had worked for. Town hall meetings became charged with tension as farmers voiced their anger and confusion, demanding answers and accountability. As the political landscape shifted, the ramifications of the tariff began to seep into the broader economy. Consumer confidence, which had been steadily rising, started to waver as uncertainty loomed large. Retailers reported a slowdown in spending, with many attributing the decline to rising prices and fears of an impending recession. The stock market, once buoyed by optimism, experienced volatility as investors grappled with the potential fallout from the trade dispute. Analysts warned that the economic expansion that had characterized the previous years could be jeopardized if the conflict continued to escalate. In the midst of this turmoil, the president remained resolute. In speeches and tweets, he reiterated his commitment to the tariff, framing it as a necessary step towards achieving fair trade. He painted a picture of a future where American manufacturing would flourish, free from the constraints of foreign competition. Yet, as the rhetoric grew more strident, cracks began to appear in the once unified front of his supporters. Some began to question whether the strategy was indeed working, wondering if the path to prosperity lay in confrontation rather than collaboration. As the months rolled on, the narrative surrounding the tariff evolved further. The initial enthusiasm of supporters began to wane as the tangible effects of the policy became more pronounced. Reports of job losses in the manufacturing sector emerged, countering the administration's claims of revitalization. The disconnect between the promises made and the reality experienced by many Americans created a growing sense of disillusionment. Politicians from both parties began to take note, sensing an opportunity to capitalize on the shifting sentiments. Internationally, the landscape continued to shift as well. Countries that had previously aligned with the U.S. began to explore alternative trading partnerships, seeking to insulate themselves from the fallout of the tariff. The World Trade Organization found itself at the center of a renewed debate about the rules of international trade, with member nations calling for reforms to address the challenges posed by unilateral actions. The implications for global trade were profound as the specter of fragmentation loomed larger. As the narrative reached a crescendo, the president faced mounting pressure to reassess his approach. The midterm elections loomed on the horizon, and with them, the potential for significant political repercussions. Constituents who had once rallied behind his vision began to voice their concerns, and the administration found itself at a crossroads. The decision to maintain the tariff or seek a resolution with China would not only shape the future of trade relations, but also determine the political landscape for years to come. In a moment of reflection, the president convened a meeting with his economic advisors, seeking to chart a course forward. The room was filled with tension as differing opinions clashed. Some advocated for a hardline stance, insisting that concessions from China were non-negotiable. Others urged a more diplomatic approach, arguing that the risks of continued escalation outweighed the potential benefits. The discussions were charged, with emotions running high as the stakes became increasingly clear. Ultimately, the decision was made to engage in negotiations with China, seeking a resolution that would address the underlying issues while mitigating the economic fallout. The announcement was met with cautious optimism as both sides prepared to enter a new phase of dialogue. The hope was that a compromise could be reached, one that would restore stability to the markets and ease the burdens felt by American consumers and businesses alike. As the negotiations unfolded, the narrative surrounding the tariff began to shift once more. The focus turned from confrontation to collaboration, as both nations recognized the importance of finding common ground. The discussions were fraught with challenges, but there was a palpable sense of determination on both sides to forge a path forward. The stakes were high, and the world watched closely, hopeful that a resolution could be achieved that would pave the way for a more stable future. In the end, the imposition of the 245% tariff on China became a pivotal moment in the ongoing saga of U.S.-China relations. It served as a reminder of the complexities of global trade, the delicate balance between protectionism and cooperation, and the profound impact that policy decisions can have on the lives of everyday people. The narrative that emerged was one of resilience and adaptation, as nations grappled with the challenges of an interconnected world, striving to navigate the turbulent waters of trade in an era defined by uncertainty. The lessons learned from this episode would resonate for years to come, shaping the future of international relations and the global economy in ways that were yet to be fully understood.